Hello everyone and welcome! The 1/24th scale 1965 Shelby GT350 model to RC conversion is on the bench once again. Today is an exciting day as I'll finally be driving this car for the first time. I'll be designing and 3D printing a custom motor mount, installing the drive shaft, and cramming all of the electronics under the hood. I've been slowly transforming this GT350 model kit into a fully functioning RC car with tons of custom 3D printed parts and some tiny electronics. I've been documenting the build process in detail, as well as posting the STL files for all the custom 3D printed parts, with the idea that anyone wanting to do a similar build can follow along and build a car just like I have here. As always, if you'd like to catch up with this project, I'll be sure to leave a link to the playlist below in the description. But with that said, let's dive back into this project and finally make this model move. At this stage, the car is getting close to being ready to drive. The front and rear suspension is in, so the only thing left to do is mount the motor to the chassis and install the drive shaft. I talked about my plans for the motor mount in the last video. I knew about where I wanted the motor to sit, and I had a pretty good idea of how to solidly mount it to the chassis. So with this idea in mind, I took a few measurements and used that to create a very simple but hopefully solid motor mount. Basically a piece that has holes for the motor and mounting hardware and holes to attach it to the chassis. I also made sure that the mount would fit within the transmission tunnel. I wasn't really concerned with making this motor mount scale looking. Maybe in the future I can come up with some kind of engine shaped case for the motor to go inside, but for now this piece will get the job done. Here's a look at the finished 3D printed part. It looks like it's going to fit great. As I talked about in the last video, the plan was to remove this pre-existing transmission crossmember and secure this motor mount in its place, and that's exactly what I did. I drilled some holes so I can use 2 screws to secure it to the chassis. The ends of these screws will be visible on the floor of the interior, but they will be pretty far forward, so they won't be too visible, and they're pretty small, so fortunately nothing too ugly. After that, I secured the motor to the mount and test fit it in the car. It fits just about perfectly. I think the motor could sit a little lower in the car, which would put the drive shaft at a slightly shallower angle, but nothing wrong with where the motor is sitting right now. It will certainly work as is. Of course, to get the power to the axle, I need to add a drive shaft. I measured the distance between the motor and the axle, then cut the 2mm steel rod to the correct length. I glued on the ends and installed the drive shaft, but of course not before test fitting everything first. And there you go, the drive shaft is complete and it works great. One little thing that I noticed while testing is that the rear wheels just barely rub the inside of the wheel wells when the suspension is compressed, so that's one minor thing that I'll be addressing later on. It's a minor thing, but I figured it's worth mentioning. Also, sorry about that annoying low battery beep on the transmitter. The next thing I did was replace the steering servo that was in the car currently with the one that I had already soldered to the other electronics. Of course, after that came the fun game of trying to stuff everything under the hood as carefully as possible. Some inner fenders will probably need to be added to keep the wires and battery away from the front wheels. As I've said before, I'm not worried about creating a detailed engine bay for this project. However, it's easy to see that if the electronics were placed in the trunk, there would be tons of room for a detailed engine bay. But with everything crammed in there, it was finally time to test drive the car, and as you can see, it works great. I definitely still need to dial in the suspension and do a few other minor things, but I'm so happy to see this car driving around. I didn't get to drive the car around for too long though, as the battery needed to be recharged, but it turns out that my RC battery charger can't do it. So I've got one on order that can, and once I get that in, I'm definitely looking forward to doing some more driving. But hey, the car works great, and from here, all that's left to do is small things like addressing any wheel rub or other minor tweaks, and of course the cosmetic stuff like painting the body. I'm really looking forward to diving into that, but for anyone following along, I hope this video has been helpful. The STL files for the parts that I used can be found on Patreon using the link below. I also just picked up another basically identical model kit. This one is technically a 66 GT350H, but it's essentially the same kit, so I'm going to be building this one up as well, just like I've done with this 65 GT350, but I'm hoping to make this second one a little more refined and add some more detail to it, such as an engine bay. This second build should be a lot of fun, as I'm experienced now with this kit, and I've got parts designed specifically for it. I'm not sure how much of that 66 GT350 project I'm going to film, or how exactly I might showcase that project, since a lot of it will basically be the same as what you all have seen with this project, but we'll see. As always, be sure to stay tuned as I work towards finishing up this 65 GT350. It should definitely be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see this car painted and fully assembled. But that's going to be all for today's video. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.